Hello everyone, welcome to the all-new Power Pack season of Captured by Women. My name is Dedo Kofi, an entrepreneur with multiple business interests. As we do on this show, I'm here with the all-star panel of co-hosts. Ladies, please introduce yourselves.
My name is Elizabeth OLYMPIO-EMANUEL. I'm a construction project consultant and a restaurateur.
I'm Nansata Yakubu, a development consultant.
I'm Sarah Safweje, real estate manager.
The all-new season of Captured by Women promises more excitement, more probing questions to our guests, and a no-holds-barred approach to the issues. In this episode of Captured by Women, we have three critical issues to talk about. First, a new exposé by renowned investigative journalist Anas Arimeyao Anas has uncovered shady deals and corruption by some members of society, military and police joint task force on GALAMSEY. In Bank 1, we delve into the saga of leaked tapes. Chairman of the National Democratic Congress, Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, is heard on tape urging a concerted attack by his party members on the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Dr. Jane Mensah, and affirming the party's affiliation to a purported vigilante group whose members were arrested during the recent Ayawaso Wogon by-election. What would this mean for the Emil Short Commission of Inquiry, which is investigating the violent incidents in that election? In Bank 2, former President John Dramani Mahama of the NDC and President Mahama Buhari of Nigeria have both emerged victorious in what has been a week of elections. John Mahama won the party's presidential primaries by a whopping 95.24% of valid votes cast. Does this huge margin foretell things to come in the presidential election of 2020? The spin is up next when we return. Popularly known as Operation Vanguard, which was instituted by President Akufo-Addo to combat the menace of illegal mining in the country. As we say in Ghana, big men are seen in the video taking bribes to undermine the fight against illegal mining in Ghana. We don't need another commission of inquiry into this as well, or do we? Ladies, has the war on GALAMSEY been lost?
This exposé has the potential to undermine the leadership of this fight against illegal mining. It has, to some extent, tainted the whole campaign, and I believe that the entire team should be dissolved and a new one set up. This is my humble opinion. This exposé has shown the depth of rot of corruption that there is across board, and they have not helped with public confidence. I am highly disappointed, and I think this should be brought to it right away and a new team constituted.
I think that the public has also lost confidence in commission of inquiries and committees,
so many committees
set up, always setting up committees. But as things stand, the president and the sector minister would have to come up with some kind of investigative inquiry into the activities of these companies that these individuals are purported to be helping. If this is not done, it's going to set a bad precedent, and then those that are playing fair by the rules are going to be the ones that will suffer consequences. We need to be able to investigate the companies for which these individuals are acting on their behalf.
But the investigations always take place. What happens after the investigation? Are people removed from office? Are they sacked completely? Are they merely reassigned to another department? In this particular video, you see several officers, from the receptionist to other people, and including military, members of the police, all allegedly taking money to break the law. And it will be my hope that the military and the police in particular would take very, very stern sanctions against their members of their forces. And not for the president, I think I agree with Eliza. the team, the committee should be disbanded, reformed, and a closer look should be taken at how it is working.
We can only hope that they are not reassigned, as we have seen in other commissions that have been put together. Something happens, and then the next thing you know, instead of letting them go home, they are actually reassigned to different departments or different agencies of the state. And so are we getting these people out of the system, or we're just...
No, they need to be punished. They need to be punished because a mandate was given to them to stop illegal mining. The effects, the rippling effects of illegal mining, it affects our waterborne bodies. It affects water that will be treated. It becomes more expensive for water to be treated for consumption. The effects of illegal mining go far-reaching. They have far-wide circumstances. And this shouldn't happen. They must be arrested. Once their guilt has been confirmed, put before court, and punished severely.
I think that in all this, what is very clear, emphatically, is the fact that the work that journalists like Anas do, the investigative journalism issues that they undertake, are things that hold the state and can hold individuals to account. Accountability issues are always very difficult to track and monitor, especially when people are corrupt. And by and large, we would have to let the state find a way of protecting such people to be able to do much more, because they act in the public interest. If we look at what happened to his colleague Ahmed Swali, who lost his life, which is also a very high price, and you can know still these people are the same people who are vanguards for anti-corruption. The same thing Major Mahama went to do, he died for. Investigative journalists are dying, and we need to be able to protect people who are working in the interest of the public, so that at the end of the day, people are brought to account for the atrocities that they are committing against the state and against Ghanaians.
So certainly, I think we all agree that people have died in the line of duty, protecting issues like this, and so their death should certainly not be in vain.
Based on what happened with the football expose, I'm hopeful and I'm encouraged that action will be taken.
I think these are serious issues that the authorities need to look into. And on the other hand, the issue of the saga of the leaked tapes by the chairman of the National Democratic Congress, Mr. Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, making serious claims about the violence that occurred during the elections, the by-elections at the Ayawaso West Wogon recently. What do you make of these revelations? More after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Captured by Women. I'm Elizabeth OLYMPIO-EMANUEL. As the hearings of the Commission of Inquiry into the violence at the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election enters its second week, a leaked tape has been purported to be released by the NDC communication team. We are joined on the program by Dr. Abdullahi Kuimi Mohammed, Lecturer, Department of Political Science of the University of Ghana, Legon, to help us make sense of this development. Welcome to Captured by Women, Dr. Abdullahi.
Thank you.
Welcome, Doctor.
Doctor, do these comments come to you as a surprise?
First of all, let's have three sets of issues here. Three sets of issues are involved here. The first one is this leaked tape actually a genuine tape? Is it a doctored tape? That is the first issue that we have to ask. The second issue that we have to be asking is this leaked tape issue a new phenomenon in the Ghanaian politics? The third issue that we have to be looking at is how are we going to really arrest all manner of threats, verbal, physical, psychological, in our body politics, such that we will have a decorous, violent-free elections come 2020, so that we will be a peaceful country. So these are the three issues that I'm going to address. First, The tape has come out. The gentleman involved is saying it's not my voice. And there are important things that we have to learn here in terms of voice. There are things about the human being God has given us that is unique. One is our fingerprint. One is our eyeballs and the way they are. Third is our DNA. These are unique characteristics for each individual, and each individual is different in this respect. Having said that, it doesn't mean that these things cannot be adulterated. They can be adulterated. And there have been science issues in the UK, in the US, and other places where people have been able to adulterate people's fingerprints, where they have been able to mimic people's voices, where people have been able to manipulate certain issues about the genetic makeup of people. And therefore, we need to really look at this issue carefully, because we need experts to really advise and then audit this tape for us to know that these tapes are really genuine or they are not genuine. So unless we are able to do that, it will be very, very difficult for anybody to sit down as a layperson and say, oh, okay, this is what we have in our hands, and then let's deal with it, and it is this, it is that, it is that. Let us not inflame passions. So we need a very careful, professional investigation into it to be able to identify, ascertain whether these tapes are actually genuine or not. So that's the first issue that I need to address. The second issue I need to address is, even granting that these things are true, this is the first time that somebody has actually put out tapes of those nature in the public domain. There have been instances running from parliamentarians, running from ministers, where tapes have been released, threats have been issued, and all that. All these, yes, are issues about national security. How many times have we seen people giving it the public image, public aura that this current one is actually receiving? So Ghanaians want peace, and both sides must be seen to be adhering to the peace that we want to enjoy in this country. Rather than, so if we want to investigate this thing, then it presupposes that then we are only on the road to a very big thing, because past retrospective tapes also need to be investigated, also need to be, for us to know the authenticity of these tapes, and then also investigate and see the security implications of all that has been done. If we don't do that, and we just simply isolate this case, and then we say, okay, let's hang the dog, then we will not be doing justice to our system, and we are not going to end these type of threats, whether they are verbal, whether they are this. So we need a holistic look at these leaked tapes, these threats, and all that. So simply picking this tape and then making a very big thing out of it will not solve our problem as a country. We need a holistic approach to these threats, whether they are verbal, whether they are physical, whether they are near or they are far away. That's the second thing I need to say. The third thing I need to say about these things is that the way we as a country want to go? Do we have to hang on to sensationalism in relation to this? There could be threats in this, yes, but let's bring it up, discuss it, and have a holistic approach to it. Ghanaians, or Ghana is more than NPP, is more than NDC. Yes. What we need to have is a national conversation in relation to all manner of threats, so that together we can find a lasting, durable solution to these problems. So this is what I have to say in relation to what.
Dr. Abdullahi, yes. Very well said. In the same vein, yes, would you then say that it would be significant for the Emile Short Committee to have a transcript or what has transpired between him and the CID meeting? Would there be any significance if they have that information in their possession to help with the current issues?
You see, that will be for us to expand the scope. In other words, we are going to give the Emile Short Commission a very elaborate mandate. They say they have just 1 month for them to wrap up the activities in camp. If we want to have a more elaborate deliberations in relation to all the security issues that we want, then it must be a time frame that is far longer than what the Emile Short Committee actually has, because they have only 1 month to investigate and to submit their issues. So it is not just the leak tape per se. For me, For me, the security threat that we are facing, actually, as I see, is this issue of vigilantism that is everywhere, this issue of kidnapping that is everywhere, this issue of serious insecurity to the person as we roam around the place. That is what we have to be talking about, and the conversation should be around. If we want to look at all tapes, audio tapes, then we must bring all historical tapes, put it on the table, discuss it, bring all political parties in, bring all meaningful Ghanaians in, and let us all have a meaningful conversation in relation to this.
I agree, Doctor, but I think this tape is coming, is the question of timing.
Yes.
Coming immediately on the back
Yes.
of the commission, and particularly Sam George's testimony, which
Yes.
came across very, very strongly as the NDC was completely innocent.
Yes.
And all the violence was instigated or initiated by these vigilantes who were in the MPP payroll. Now with this tape, we're assuming it's not been doctored.
Yes.
There's a clear section that mentions that Kandahar boys were brought from Tamale.
No.
So on that basis, don't you think that it undermines the NDC's call for disbanding? It doesn't make it seem genuine.
Well, that's what I'm already saying, that in the first place, we are not even aware about the genuineness of this tape. If we are aware of the genuineness of this tape, then the wider conversation can really start. Because where we are now with the MSCL Commission is only starting from the middle. Why am I saying we are starting from the middle? We are starting from the middle because people are already talking about what happened prelude to the by-elections. So the prelude to the by-elections is equally important. Then what happened on the day of the by-election is equally important, and what happened aftermath is equally important.
Yes.
And therefore, if we want to do justice to this issue about by-election and election violence in general, then we can start from the middle. We must start from the beginning. If we start from the beginning, then we will have a genuine, fair discussion about how to end this vigilantism. So for me, if we start by just simply saying, okay, let's go to a short commission, we'll be starting from the middle. Let's start from the beginning, and we see, how did this start? How did we get here? And why are we having this?
That might take us way back,
Yes,
many years.
Sure, but that is the only way for us to be able to end violence. Because you see, when you start from that place, someone will say, oh, well, but why is that this one also happened and you never said this? Why is that one also happened, you never did this? So for us to genuinely discuss this issue, we need to bring the people who are actually at each other's neck to the table.
But in the meantime, do you think they should go ahead and disband these groups?
Sure, disbanding, we have no alternative than to disband, because we need peace. And Ghana is more than NDC, as I said before, is more than MPP.
Completely.
We have a much bigger population that is really looking for peace. There are genuine people, even when we say, hey, run, some people cannot run.
Yeah.
Some people are even in bed.
Yes.
Some people are hospitalized. Yes. So there is a lot more at stake than what these two parties are talking about. People are talking about, when they hear the crack of fire, even those who are sitting there and say, hey, we will fight.
No.
None of them will stand to fight.
That is true.
So that is why this discussion must be wider, must be genuine, must be transparent, must involve multiple stakeholders in discussing how we go forward as a country.
Dr. Abdullahi, so all of this is beginning to seem to me like a cat and mouse game. But given what we know now, or given the assumptions with which we are working with, do you think that ex-President John Mahama should have held a meeting with the diplomatic corps on the Ayawaso West Wogon election issue?
Let us not be in the dark box thinking that even what happened, the international community didn't know.
No, yes.
We must understand that they are aware, they are with us here, they know what is happening here, and probably they have more information than we have.
Sometimes they know more than
they
we
have,
do.
have no more than we have. So merely putting out there doesn't change anything. For me, it doesn't really change anything, because the international community is already aware of what is happening here. And therefore, merely putting it across there, if what I'm putting across there is the truth, then I have nothing to fear. If what I'm putting out there is lies, then I have something to explain.
What about if it's a one-sided truth, which I think his presentation...
Yes, so that's why I'm saying that, that's what I'm saying, that the international community is not a dark or a sleeping community. It's a community that has multiple eyes,
yes,
multiple lenses, and they can read between what we are presenting. So let us not be in the business of thinking that all that we present to them, they're just going to consume hook and sinker without really digesting, looking at different sides of the coin. So he presenting it there does not change anything. The international community will make up its own investigation and then assess the situation and come up with their own perception about what had really happened. That's what I think. You see, genuinely, if we want to have peace, people were saying, oh, well, there is boot there, boot for boot,
no,
and this statement is not right, that statement is not right. I think that the first thing people ask is that, why is it that there was a boot in the first place? Because Ghanaians we don't need a boot. We have genuine professionals who are trained to handle peace, security issues in this country. And there are two departments, the police service, the armed forces.
Yeah.
We don't need anything else.
No, we
and therefore, why should there be a boot in the first place for another boot to come and match it in the field?
Yeah.
We don't need any boots. So if there is already a boot there, somebody will bring another boot to match it. So the point is, we shouldn't have any boot in the field because Ghanaians don't need a boot. Because we already have professionals who can handle these things. And if we give it to them, genuinely, I think they will be able to handle it. That's why we should be, the conversation we should be having.
Well, we would like to believe they can genuinely handle it, but...
Yeah, but so that's why, and when we formed the Peace Council, I was genuinely very, very happy. Why was I happy? Because I felt that that would be an independent arbiter in between these political parties. And therefore, if there is a problem in the country, then they should show leadership by bringing these, vying parties to table and to talk. And therefore, for example, if it happened and then we had this by-election violence, I think the Peace Council should have been proactive.
Yes.
Call the two leaders, okay, President Akufo-Addo, we want to meet you. Ex-President Mahama, we want to meet you. Let's sit down. We have a genuine problem in this country. How do we trash it so that it doesn't get into the public domain? So that they then come out and advise, okay, we have this problem, we have met with the two leaders, and this is the way both of them have agreed for us to have peace into the future.
But I think a meeting like that is very, very good, but it should definitely have included, or should include, the heads of all the armed forces.
That's what I'm saying. So if they had convened,
not just the leaders.
Yes, if they had convened such a meeting, I mean, bringing these other people will not be difficult. So if we want them, let's bring the security forces, sit them down and say that, okay, this is the path of peace we want to choose. And we are in the middle. We don't belong to any party, but we want something that is in the interest of Ghana. So let's take that course. That should have been the way. So they shouldn't just sit down for something to happen, then they come out with a reaction. They should be proactive in coming out and designing policies that will preempt anything that was going to harm this peace.
Prevent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So former President John Dramani Mahama and Mahama Buhari of Nigeria must be the most elated politicians in the sub-region. They both won their primaries in Ghana for John Mahama and the national elections in Nigeria for Muhammadu Buhari by wide margins, much more so than the pundits predicted. We'll be back with Bang 2. Stay tuned. Welcome to Bang 2. This is Captured by Women, and I am Nansata Yakubu. This week, former President John Dramani Mahama has been voted to lead the NDC into the 2020 elections. If this was in doubt, he won with 95.24%, a percentage margin that is even much larger than when he was unopposed in the just past elections to lead the NDC. John Mahama stood with 5 other candidates and came out tops, with the rest of the spoils being shared by the 5 candidates. Except Alban Bagbin, John Mahama won in every other candidate's constituency. A Captured by Women is asking, does this mean something else for the rest of the candidates, or is the NDC trying to communicate to all Ghanaians their intention for 2020 elections? At the same time, across the border, Nigeria has voted back President Muhammadu Buhari for a second term in office. We are joined by Dr. Kobe Mensah, a pollster with iPoll and a lecturer at the University of Ghana. He will be sharing with us his thoughts on the past events and then help us understand what this means for politics in the sub-region. Dr. Mensah, you are welcome to Captured by Women.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome.
Dr. Mensah, our first question has to do with what the pundits said. The pundits, the journalists, monitors, sophologists who are normally referred to as pollsters, all indicated that John Mahama will have a run for his money. What accounts for this resounding victory?
All right, thank you. Let me say that I'm glad to be amongst you. Fantastic, ladies, and I'm glad to be here with you. All right, first of all, let me say that yes, it was a surprising win. Not necessarily that we didn't expect that he would win. Obviously, we've done polls. We have actually seen that yes, the NDC was going to actually elect, former President Mahama as a flag bearer, but the margin was, the issue. I mean, we expected a very spirited, campaign from, Alban Babin, from Spio Gabra, from, Professor Alabi. I mean, these were formidable candidates. Of course, not to forget Sly, Sly Mensah, for example. So we knew that it was going to be very competitive. So yes, we're expecting between 85, 90, but not 95. I'm sure Mahama himself would be surprised to get that massive endorsement. So okay, certainly, yes, it was a surprise.
So speaking of this, it was an overwhelming endorsement. So is that a sign of things to come? Does that mean that the presidential election 2020 is likely to be closer?
Very competitive. I mean, let us not forget, the last election, NDC, after the election, when they lost, one of the reasons that was attributed to their loss was the fact that the party stayed home, i.e. the voters, the backers, the activists for NDC, for example, were actually apathetic to the party. Their main constituency being the Volta, for example, a lot of people didn't show up. So we attribute one of the reasons why they lost was because the NDC's base wasn't really at the party. Again, we know that running up to the elections, there were quite a number of issues that we saw that the party was disconnected from the presidency, and it is not any secret. There was open displeasure, where even Alban Babin one day actually said that they are not even given access to the presidency. So there were a lot of issues that we knew attributed or contributed to NDC's loss. Now, having such an emphatic win, that tells you that they're actually coming around. Perhaps they're ready to forgive and make sure that they can forge ahead. Because obviously, as former President, Kufuor said, you rather want your party to be in government. You want to be a servant in a government or a party in government than be a leader of a position party. So they realize that they have a common goal. They have a common enemy, and therefore they must actually come forward for the elections in 2020.
So can we expect that in the 2020, that's going to be a deciding factor, the NDC voters deciding en masse that they would rather have a president that perhaps they are not too happy with than be in opposition?
Of course, but that also would depend on the character of the Mahama administration. I mean, not in government, but once they're trying to form a government, which we normally say shadow government, who are part of his cabinet inner circle. Now, if he can put a formidable team that all and sundry within the party actually respect and are prepared to work with, then certainly you're going to see NDC showing up. But of course, that's a tough match because you have an incumbency, and NPP itself would make sure that they are also at the party because they wouldn't want to go the first time.
Yes. But Mahama lost as an incumbent, so I don't think incumbency is any protection anymore in Ghana.
Well, we haven't established that because usually you establish with a trend. If we had about 3 incidences where we voted, then we can say there's a trend. Of course, people would argue that the NDC had been in government for 8 years, so in some quarters, it's not just that he was in government for one term. So you can actually say that. Of course, there is an argument that says that yes, he had been in one term and then he's been voted out. But because we haven't established that trend, not even across the continent, obviously, good luck. Jonathan was kicked out in the first year as well, in the first term as well, sorry. But we haven't really established a trend where we see that consistently voters are actually kicking out administration in the first, term. We haven't established that trend.
Dr. Mensah, so we were discussing a while ago about political vigilantism. And I think we would like to know, what is this going to be a deciding factor in the 2020 elections? Are their comments, their posture, and the things that they do between now and 2020 election, is it going to be a deciding factor in where voters swing?
It is, because you see, if you look at the competition or in the political market, the activist, which is, or the base, not necessarily activists, but your political base would always rally behind you unless there's a cause for apathy. But the center, which we normally call the swing votes, are the people who are actually looking at what are you saying, not necessarily even policy, but issue-based, what are you saying, or your temperament, how are you carrying yourself, your behavior, towards the voters, one, and again towards your other competitors. When you show some kind of a behavior that is actually contrary to what people expect, they're not going to come around. They will make sure that the party that actually carries itself decently, the party that actually speaks to the issues, the party that actually seems to have the best temperament, and the best programs win. So if you're in a position and you want to really make sure that you can capture power, you have to put your best foot forward. That is, carry out a very good behavior. Don't forget, Mahama also lost the election, one, because there were quite a lot of issues within his own presidency that people kept on saying, rain on them, and he was not raining on them. And as a result, the center, and most of it was the middle class, became so angry that they thought he wasn't firm enough, and as a result, they kicked it out. They kicked the NDC government out. If the current administration also doesn't seem to be doing, reining in on the vigilantism, and like as we've seen quite a lot of examples, they immediately came to power. These guys were seizing, what do you call, toll booths. They were seizing quite a lot of KVIPs. They were doing quite a lot of things, even to the extent that people went into courtrooms and set free people who were actually being taken through legal processes. Now, once you behave like that and you are not seen as working to stop that, the society will kick you out.
Actually going to ask a follow-up, because since you are the expert, in Ghana, has it been established what the swing voters are? Do we have like a percentage to say that this is the swing voters we have?
I mean, there had been a lot of research ongoing. I particularly did a research in 2014 where, because there's a narrative about the two parties saying they hold 40% each, and I have always argued that that is not the case. They themselves do not have register completely that actually suggests their membership, because globally party membership is going down. A lot of people are apathetic with political parties. People don't see why they have to be paid dues, and as a result the numbers are going down. If you don't have the register of your entire membership, of course they have register for delegates, for activists, etc., but the entire membership, i.e. people who just want to vote NDC or MPP, do they have that membership records? They do not have. So on what basis are they saying that they have 40%? It's just because of the electoral records. So 1992 they had this percentage, 1990, that is 1994, 2000. So cycle on cycle, they get a particular percentage. And they think that percentage represents what the members they have. They don't. Are people actually swinging? And we have seen evidences in research where we have seen people swinging from party to party, electoral cycle on cycle. Now, if you ask people where would rich Ghanaians vote now, a lot of people will say they can vote both ways. Where would farmers vote? A lot of people will tell you both ways. So we don't have a stable or a staple, voter size for these two parties. Their influence have dwindled, on various voter categories. They are now sharing the pie each way, depending on who performs and who doesn't perform, and then they kick them out. So there's no evidence that they have 40% each now.
As a political marketer, how then can we trust your polls? Whereas we have, for instance, Trump's elections that were held, Donald Trump, President Mahama Buhari, the one with convincing percentages. How then do we trust that the polls that you come with, the predictions, are based on some statistics?
I mean, polls are not, they're science, but they're not pure science. All right. If I say they're not pure science, because some of the times you're actually collecting perceptions, opinions. people can lie. They can choose to say they want to vote this way, but they will vote that way. You can't actually regulate that, or you can't actually control for those. However, we look at the methodology and we look at trends, for example. So if going to election 2020, let's say we carry out about 4 polls or 3 polls, and each of the time you have a certain percentages, you then put together and then you can actually predict, and say perhaps the vote is going to swing this way. Now, the 2 polls that we've done on the NDC leadership, for example, when we did the national executive poll, we got it absolutely right. I mean, we were predicting 83% for Asiedin Katengu. And it actually came to pass, all right? Because you're looking at methodology and you're looking at the kind of things that you put through. Now, the current poll, again, we predicted the wins, but the margins were not as we expected. And like we said, even if you look at the Democratic election, I mean, the U.S. elections, for example, the Democratic Party was actually predicted to win. I mean, most of the poll was suggesting Clinton win, all right? And it was no brainer because everybody knew that Clinton was going to win anyway. Of course, Donald Trump pulled a surprise.
He did.
Exactly.
Just
so polls,
he
yes,
did it for sure.
We trust polls based on methodology and whether the trends are there to be established.
Coming closer to home, do you think that was what happened in Nigeria? Because Buhari was largely unpopular. He was not really predicted to win. And everyone thought Atiku Abubakar had a very strong chance. If you spoke to Nigerians, they were like, oh, Buhari is going out. He's won. Resounding victory.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think it's a media thing. Usually government incumbents are not the favorite. Most of the time it's the opposition. Why? Because the government is reforming, for example, and you get people peeved about that. The government is doing some of the things that people don't like. The opposition has the free will to say anything and do anything because, of course, they're not faced with the reality. So the opposition can promise and create this hunky-dory environment and say, oh, I'll take you to heaven. So then the media, picks up on that. People go overdrive and kind of be so angry with the government. So in most cases, if you look at the elections, the opposition has a free ride. And it would always look as though the opposition is about to win, but then you get a surprise, from the incumbency. So with Buhari's case, I think the driving force was that he himself was seen as a genuine man. Do you get it? And he was seen as though he was acting. Yeah, people really saw. And we did a poll, and Buhari was in the lead. But the numbers were not encouraging, so we didn't actually put it out. And I was asking, my colleague, Ato, I said, Ato, do you really get a sense that Buhari is winning? Because the polls were showing that he was winning. Truly, too, he won. But the thing is this, people saw that he was genuine, that he was actually on course of what he said he was doing. However, people were also feeling the pinch of what he said he was doing because he was blocking, economic sewage, slippage holes. He was, trying to make sure that things work. Now, when these things are happening, mind you, people are not going to have free money. It's when people can steal and they can dash money out that the economy, kind of become. But when you actually, kind of putting measures in place, then you're going to have a tightening environment, and therefore people are displeased about that. So you would have these sentiments going. But then genuinely, you would see that, although people may not really like what is going on, they think that he's genuine and he's actually doing what he said he was going to do. Once a leader can actually show that leadership trait, that you actually seeing through your project, suddenly you can have the nod. But where you're actually being seen as though you're saying one thing and doing something else, I think that's where the problem comes, and kind of incumbency actually loses.
Dr. Kofi-Mensah, thank you for coming on Captured.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this break.
Well, I'm happy that we got answers to the pertinent issues of the week. Make a date with us again, same time next week on Captured by Women.